All right, welcome back, Community Focus here on Channel 6 TV. Kenny Fogle here with you. Glad you could be with us. We've got Election Day, as we've talked about several times, coming up next Tuesday, and that's the day that you get to have your voice in what goes on in our state government. Well, we got a special guest here today, Mr. Whitney Westerfield. Whitney, we first of all would appreciate you being here today with us.
And I appreciate the opportunity. Glad to be here.
Running for Attorney General.
Yes, sir.
All righty. So that's a pretty lofty office to be running for. And
I think it's the second most important seat in state government after the governor's seat.
All right. Well, tell me a little bit about Whitney Westerfield.
Sure. I'm from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. I'm a former prosecutor, assistant Commonwealth's attorney in Christian County, where I've served there a little over 5 years, prosecuting cases from homicides to misdemeanors and really everything in between. Was in there for a little over 5 years and resigned to run for the state senate in 2012 against a 20-year incumbent. And God blessed me with a victory. Won in 2012, and since my first day on the job in the Senate, I have served as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where I've been able to do some work I think that's good for all of Kentuckians. Last year was overhauling the juvenile code, Senate Bill 200, and now a national model piece of legislation. West Virginia has borrowed it. South Dakota's looked at it. Kansas is looking at it right now. To this year's heroin bill and the dating violence bill, two pieces of legislation that I'm very proud of, that took a lot of work from a lot of people, but I was in the room and helped write those. And that's the experience I bring to the table in the race.
Well, obviously you impressed some people in Christian County. What do they know about you that we don't know yet or should know?
Well, I guess the best answer to that is that they know the truth. Regardless of what the attack ads would have people believe, I'm very proud of my prosecuting record there, as is my boss, my old boss. Very proud of the work that I did there, and I'm very proud of the work I've done for them and for the citizens of Todd and Logan County as well, that I also represent for the 3rd Senate District. Takes a lot of work to do prosecuting. It takes a lot of effort, but you get to wear the white hat. It's rewarding work. And you get to work with victims advocates, with law enforcement every day to try to fight for public safety in your own community. And I've got that experience. And I know administratively how those offices should function, from those frontline prosecuting offices all the way to Frankfort. And again, now as a legislator, I've been able to work to really bring people from every part of the political spectrum together on different issues. The heroin bill, certainly one of the most important achievements of this year's session, really of recent memory. We've been working on it for 3 years. And we finally got something through that increases access to treatment for people suffering from addiction. We increased penalties for traffickers. We required them to serve more of their sentence before they're parole eligible. We created a whole new crime of importation that was put into use less than 2 days after the governor signed the bill into law. The governor, mind you, the father of my opponent, who continues to attack me on the airwaves in all sorts of ways that even the Herald Leader has called out as completely inaccurate, and my old boss is completely inaccurate. But they continue to do that despite the fact that they've praised me for the work I've put into the General Assembly.
Well, somewhere along the way, about 2 or 3 years ago, you had to make a conscious decision to go for the second most powerful job in state government. Something triggered you to say, I want to be Attorney General. What is that?
Well, I came to it reluctantly, to be honest, because it's something I could have stayed in the Senate where I still serve, and obviously my term ends in 2016. So I'm still in the Senate, still doing the work of the chairman of Judiciary, and that legislative agenda is still moving very aggressively forward and getting ready for 2016. But as we geared towards the 2015 election cycle and the field for candidates for the Attorney General race started to pan out a little bit more, and we'd see people that were going to run or not, I became frustrated with the idea that someone thinks they can inherit this seat or that someone thinks they can buy this seat. And for those of you watching this, remember, my opponent, Andy Beshear, through his father, and I said this in our debate on KET, and it's the truth, I have been campaigning against Andy and fundraising against Steve. I saw the debate. That's right. Fundraising against Steve. And that's the truth. They have raised $2.7 million for a down-ballot candidate that's never been a candidate before in his life, and has never been a prosecutor, and he's never worked on policy. You'd have to add every other Democratic candidate together, and you'd still be $1 million short of what they've raised for him. It's unseemly. And I think it comes with a lot of strings attached, or certainly the question that strings might be attached, that someone's able to raise such unseemly amounts of money. And I don't think that's the way the system should work. I don't think because he's the son of the governor that he should get a pass, that doesn't make you qualified to do this job, any more than it would me if I were in his shoes. Whereas I've gone through and done some of the things that the AG is going to be responsible for doing now and in the future, And it bothers me that someone thinks they can inherit the seat. I think the work of the AG is too important. A lot of people don't understand that the Attorney General is the top law officer of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And when the people of Kentucky need someone to stand up for them, stand up for their rights, whether it's being challenged by the federal government, this president or the next one, whether it's a state regulation that's overburdensome and puts different businesses on different footing, and we see that happening right now from this governor in this state, and I suspect his son's probably not going to challenge it. But that's going on, and when the people of Kentucky need someone to challenge that in court, that's the shoulders of the AG that rests on. The marriage case, defending the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, it's part of the oath. You do that. You do it until no defense is left to be made. You can't pick and choose which things you're going to do and which laws you're going to support. And I think that's important. And I think it's the second most important seat. And someone prepared and experienced needs to be really ready to take it and do the job and not look at it. A joke a few weeks ago to me that they said, "What do you know what AG stands for?" And obviously I know what it stands for, but they were asking that it may, suggesting it stands for something else. And I played along and said, "No, what's it stand for?" And they said, "Aspiring governor." And, no one had ever raised that to me before, that joke. But to the extent that prevents an AG from being able to do what needs to be done and fight for public safety, then that needs to be off the radar. I have no desire to run for higher office. If I win this seat, I'll run for re-election in 4 years, and then I'll be done. Maybe I'll run for the Senate again or go back home, but I'm not going to run for governor, and I'm certainly not going to run for something in the middle of my term. You need an AG that's focused on protecting Kentuckians, protecting our families, our children, our jobs, and our economy.
Well, not only were you running against a guy with a famous last name in the state of Kentucky, but you're also following a guy that's actually running for governor right now. So what would you see that's going on, and not trying to put you in the middle of another race here right now, but what do you see that's going on in the Attorney General's office right now that you'd like to see done differently?
Well, there are three things that I'd focus on, and these have been part of my campaign since the first day. The first is increase the litigation, as I've already said, against the federal government or state government. And there are examples there. There's certainly the EPA is trying to wear us out, whether it's the Clean Power Plan or the waterways of the U.S., or even how they make those rules, just procedural games they're playing right now about how long it takes for a rule to show up on the code book. And then you've got education, immigration. 26 states have challenged the president on his executive amnesty action earlier this year. We weren't one of those 26. By the way, they were found to be right in federal court, in 2 rounds of federal court actually, but we were never one of those 26 to challenge it, and that's a legitimate issue.
Even if you're right or wrong, you should challenge.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. My policy position may not line up with my party or with you or whatever.
But you got the obligation to challenge.
The president has authority, and he's exceeding that authority, and that's unconstitutional, and it's a burden on the states, and it's illegal. It needs to be challenged. So that's the first thing. The second thing, the cybercrimes unit of the office. Jack Conway set that up when he first took office. And that's something that I can applaud him for, but it's never been utilized to the extent it should. Let me give you some context. The state police, which is not under the AG's authority, but just so people understand and have some numbers and some context here, the state police testified this year, 2015, before my Senate Judiciary Committee and in the House Judiciary Committee both, about their ICAC task force. This is the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which is tasked solely with investigating and prosecuting cases involving internet filth involving children. They testified this year they're only able to investigate 2% of that garbage online in Kentucky right now. 98% is left uninvestigated. 98% of those perpetrators uncaught and punished. 98% of those victims unsaved. And that's unacceptable. They can't manage to do more than 2% because they live hand to mouth with grant dollars that go up and down. It's not reliable. More legislative experience. We fixed that this year with a bill requiring a fee paid from those sex offenders themselves to fund that effort. But so that you have roughly comparable numbers here, the state police is roughly the same size as the Internet or the Cybercrimes Division of the AG's office. Yeah. It's not a small team, only about 4 people working there. And they've got a half dozen or a dozen computers, some of which are used for their digital forensic work. there's just not enough of them to go around. We both have smartphones. We both are on Facebook and Twitter and wherever.
Right.
We do banking online, shop online, communicate online. And there's not an age group of Kentuckians that can't benefit from more education about the dangers that exist out there. And we rarely go a week or two without hearing about some massive data breach, even when our federal government or state government is a victim of that, sometimes by the criminal element, sometimes from foreign governments. We're not doing enough. Children need to know what kind of risks are involved in the apps they use and what they share. Their parents need to know what their kids are doing, how those apps work. I was with a group of kids yesterday. We were talking about a number of things, and I just asked, how many of you have smartphones? And they all said yes. How many of you have Snapchat? And they all said yes. And I said, how many of you know where the servers are that Snapchat uses? How many of you know what their privacy policy is, what they do with that information, how they keep it, do they anonymize it or not? None of them know the answers to that question. Neither do their parents.
I don't have a clue.
That's right. So that kind of stuff we need to educate people more about what's going on, because the technology is outpacing our knowledge about it vastly. And then you've got senior citizens, grandparents and senior citizens that still don't know scams and email phishing attempts when they come in. There's not an age group that can't benefit from it, from education and more awareness, and then of course investigation and prosecution. So that's the second thing.
Okay.
The third thing, and I think probably the most important, advocate for public policy. In 3 years, General Conway's never darkened my doorstep, not one time. Not to advocate for or against anything. Not this year's heroin bill, not the dating violence bill, not last year's juvenile code bill, not the Bryan-Durman Act, not anything related to any bill. He's never come, not any budget issue, nothing. And that's a waste of the office. As the top prosecutor, you'd think he would have at least advocated for prosecutors and law enforcement, but not even that. And I think that's a waste. He showed up for the bill signing for the heroin bill, spoke for 5 or 6 minutes and bragged about things that he didn't do anything on. And that was his contribution to the effort. That's unacceptable. We need an AG that's really ready to be in the room, roll the sleeves up, and work. Someone asked me, they gave an example of some press statement that he had back in the fall last year on heroin. And they said, isn't that getting involved? Isn't that contributing? I said, no. That's not where the bill gets written. That's not where you figure out how to make sure that the people that are commercially trafficking serve more of their time before they're parole eligible. That's not where you figure out what naloxone is, which is an anti-overdose drug that is used and administered. That's not where you try to work with stakeholders and Democrats and Republicans and independents and everybody from all these different positions to try to come up with a Good Samaritan provision that will work and that will pass. That's not where the work's done in press conferences and when the cameras are rolling. You do that in the rooms in those 18 to 20-hour days, and the next AG needs to be ready to do that. And I've done it and had great success. Bipartisan, frankly nonpartisan issues. I've been able to do that in 3 short years in the Senate. And I think that experience is too important to ignore.
Well, like I said, we've learned a lot here today. Is there anything that our voters need to know for sure about you before next Tuesday?
Well, first, I certainly humbly ask for your vote, and I appreciate you paying attention to this interview today. I humbly ask for your vote for Whitney Westerfield on November 3rd. But above everything else, regardless of who you vote for, keep us in your prayers. Please pray for, I certainly ask that you pray for me and pray for my wife and my daughter. Pray for my opponent and his wife and his children. Pray for the candidates you support and the ones you don't. Scripture calls for us to pray for our leaders. And we have leaders now. We're going to have leaders in a week that are brand new. And just pray that God lifts up the leaders that are going to move Kentucky in a direction that honors and glorifies Him. Be prayer warriors over this next several days as we come in towards the close of this election cycle. That'd be my most important request.
All right. Well, it's been a long year of campaigning, I'm sure. You've seen a lot of the states. So
it has. And regardless, I'm going to be in Frankfort either as the next Attorney General or for at least one more year as the Senate Judiciary Chairman, and there's more work to do. So I'm looking forward to getting back to it.
Well, we appreciate you stopping in Nelson County here and spending some time with us
pleasure.
today. Whitney Westerfield for State Attorney General. So again, Election Day coming up next Tuesday, November 3rd. That's your day to have your say. So we'll stick around. Got a lot more to come here on Community Focus here on Channel 6 TV. We'll be right back.